SIG-23, 24 December 2020. This is from ForwardObserver.com. DHS Inspector General will begin investigating whether Customs and Border Patrol's use of personal location data violated federal law. CBP purchased the data from a third-party vendor which collects location data from smartphone apps. Quote, federal agencies are tracking American citizens without warrants. The public deserves answers and accountability. This is from Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat, Oregon. Well, if you remember, a video that I put out, one of the first videos I put out, maybe the first one, an intelligence report from the Department of Homeland Security states that anti-fascist activists, or Antifa, are being investigated as possible terrorists with affiliations to Syria, even though no self-identified members of the loosely affiliated Antifa protest movement have either been proven to commit any murders, well, there's Rhino, or carry out any terrorist attacks. Well, there's every single one they've done throughout the country since about May. The July 14 report entitled The Syrian Conflict and Its Nexus to the U.S.-based Anti-Fascist Movement states Antifa is being analyzed under the 2019 DHS Strategic Framework for Countering Terrorism and Targeted Violence, according to a copy of the document obtained by the Progressive political magazine. I love it, the Progressive. Progressively dragging you back into the dark ages. There you go. The Nation. It received a copy from someone who previously worked on DHS intelligence. The report details more than half a dozen people identified with various far-left causes who personally visited Syria to fight alongside Kurdish factions. The factions include the YPG, the People's Defense Unit, the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and the Peshmerga, military forces that provide security for Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan region. None of these organizations are currently listed by the U.S. as terrorist groups. In the low-intensity conflict in some, NFAC leader arrested by the FBI. The leader of the Not Effing Around Coalition, or NFAC, John Fitzgerald Johnson, is facing federal charges for allegedly pointing a rifle at federal agents and Louisville Metro Police Department officers on 4 September. According to criminal complaint documents and photos, Johnson pointed a rifle at officers conducting surveillance of crowds gathered in Jefferson Square Park. Johnson is specifically charged with felony, quote, assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers or employees, end quote, and could face up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Observers note, the NFAC was centralized around Johnson's authority. Some are expressing frustration and claiming this to be another coordinated event to suppress the armed black movement. So far, we have not observed any specific calls for retaliation or violence for the arrest. Didn't he do that video? Didn't he do that video about the AR-15? The AR-15? I have to look that up. Yeah. Anyway, leftists contemplate Biden's inauguration protest, or they contemplate a Biden inauguration protest. Far-left chat room participants discuss protesting the potential inauguration of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden if he wins the election. One participant accused the administration of becoming the biggest neoliberal hellhole imaginable. I can't remember who said it, but somebody actually, and this is so true, it's either the left eats their own or liberals eat their own. You can never please them. Their foundations are like shifting sand in an earthquake, or sand castles on the beach. All right. The far left, observers know, the far left is likely to continue disruptions regardless of who is president. Remember, presumptive Vice President-elect Harris encouraged more protests, even if they were elected, because they said it was vital, it was necessary. So, Biden's recently announced cabinet picks have further incensed many leftists who claim he is attempting to reestablish a status quo of oligarchic rule in bed with corporate power. You think, you idiots? Bunch of idiots. In a recent anarchist Radio Berlin podcast, Americans from The Final Straw Radio stated that 2020 has awakened the far left. The country's increased polarization is irreversible, and the left should prepare to mobilize under a potential Biden administration. I would say that the polarization is irreversible. Biden's gun control proposals have drawn criticism and calls for non-compliance from armed leftists on social media as well. You didn't think it would apply to you? Alt-right calls for attacks on protesters and infrastructure. Alt-right chat room participants reissued calls for accelerationist attacks on infrastructure and indiscriminate attacks on rioting crowds. One contributor encouraged the movement to target serious infrastructure, such as power stations. Another encouraged attacks on both protesters, rioters, and police to make the situation worse. Observers note, some have claimed that destructive riots this year were initiated by alt-right accelerationists wishing to cause chaos and potentially provoke a harsh government response. There is a lack of evidence to back up this claim, but that's not to say the strategy was or will be off the table. White supremacists often propose acts of terror and catastrophic attacks to bring about a societal collapse in order to build a white ethno-state. And what about us in the middle that want nothing to do with either of those two parties? I guess what time will tell. Upcoming event calendar for December, 4 to 10 December. Avenge Michael Rhino, RAM nationwide. Remember, RAM is the base, or actual literal American Al-Qaeda, which means the base. 4 December, protest Pence, refuse fascism. Atlanta, Georgia. 5 December, BLM Antifa soup drive. They're actually doing something useful. Well, there's nothing left to burn. BLM Antifa? Antifa BLM? Antifablum? There is no difference. Charleston, South Carolina. 5 December, defend Sacramento, Antifa. From whom? Yourselves? If you want to defend Sacramento, Antifa, stay home. Try not to burn anything. Sacramento, California. 7 December, no more pigs, they, them collective. You might actually be more effective if you could actually sort yourselves out first. The they, them collective, stop it. Washington, D.C. 11 to 12 December, defend D.C., all out D.C., Washington, D.C. It's a lot of D.C.s in there. All right. 12 December, March for Trump, Washington, D.C. That's it from Fort Observer. Now, from Los Angeles, if anybody's watching out there, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti issued an order for residents to stay at home, warning that the city is approaching a devastating tipping point. Oh, God, the horror. In its fight against COVID-19 that would overwhelm the hospital system. Stop it. It's called control, people. That's all it is. My God. We must minimize contact with others as much as possible. What about during we're in the midst of flu season. You know how many other strains of flu there are? Are we just going to minimize contact all year. There's summer flu, spring flu, fall flu. People get sick when it gets hot. I mean, it's all about keeping people separated from other people, because human beings need human contact, human interaction. Well, you can control them better if you can limit that and put them in little frustrated little boxes in their homes. We must minimize contact with others as much as possible, Garcetti wrote in the order dated December 2. The steps were needed to avoid risking, quote, needless suffering and death, end quote. How about if the state of California knocks their stupid crap off and tells people, hey, you know what? If you need to make a living, go make a living. With a 97, 98 percentile survivability from a strain basically of the flu, which I think was manufactured personally based on the things that it's targeted to hit most effectively, most seriously. You want to do something about suffering, Garcetti? How about you have people just go back to work? You could alleviate a lot of suffering that way. The order, which supersedes one from June, prohibits public and private gatherings of people from more than one household and states that all businesses in the city that require people to work on location must stop operations. And then what? How's the city going to run? Walking, driving, travel on public transport, bikes, motorcycles, and scooters are prohibited, other than for undertaking essential activities. Who's going to determine essential activities, you freaking little dictator? There are several exemptions, including faith-based outdoor services and the homeless. Others that can continue to operate include supermarkets, grocery stores, and healthcare operations, but that doesn't cover gyms and similar facilities. Still, activities such as golf, tennis, and pickleball are permitted. What in the hell are you doing? Do you even know? Do you have constituents that personally give to your campaign that play these particular sports? Really? Those particular sports are permitted according to the order. The city's safety protocols on social distancing follow those developed by Los Angeles County, Garcetti said. S&P futures turned negative after the order. You think? The city's safety protocols. Next line. Los Angeles County has the most infections of any county in the U.S. with 408,398 confirmed cases and supposedly, if you're not adjusting for a 96% difference, 7,700 deaths, which means that it's significantly less than that. Probably less than 600. Nationwide, COVID-19 fatalities reached more than 2,700 Wednesday, the deadliest day so far, according to data compiled by Johns Hopkins University. If you want to believe that kind of data coming from these kinds of places at this time, because of all the garbage that they've been putting into the system, all the garbage that they've been putting out into the news. Motorcycle wreck, COVID-19. Fell down, broke my hip, died, COVID-19. Had a heart attack and died, COVID-19. Had cancer and died, COVID-19. Heat stroke, COVID-19. Yeah. Anyone over the age of 16 traveling into LA must complete an online form upon arrival. What are you going to blockade the city? You're going to blockade the city and what? Have little police, freaking police state checkpoints at each one of the little streets going into LA proper? They must complete an online form upon arrival to acknowledge they've read and understood a California travel advisory. Failure to submit the form is punishable by a fine up to $500. What if I'm driving through? What if I'm driving through Los Angeles proper, Garcetti? because there are little towns that surround Los Angeles proper. The entire basin isn't just Los Angeles. The Rust Belt, New York, and California are likely to drive up the pace of virus-related deaths in coming weeks as the U.S. approaches 300,000 fatalities based on a forecast from the University of Massachusetts Amherst's Reich Lab. Which means that the 300,000 fatalities, if it's like 94 or 96% inaccurate, maybe about 1,000 nationwide, directly related to COVID, and not COVID being some extraneous factor. My math could be off. All right, 623 out.